In this video, we will take a turtle program and show how to reorganize it to use functions. This program was explained in a previous video, which you should watch, but I will show its execution here again. When you run this program, it asks for the X and Y coordinates of a vertex, and it draws a number of rectangles. You need to give the width and height of the rectangles and how many rectangles you want horizontally and vertically. So it is going to give you a grid essentially. So let's say we want 6 rectangles horizontally and 6 vertically, and we get what it does is it draws a bunch of lines, 7 lines for 6 rectangles and 7 lines vertically, and you get those rectangles. So that is what it does. You can see the explanation of all this in the video. So I'm not going to explain it again, but I will show you how this can be reorganized. I'll show you the reorganized version of the program. So here is the reorganized version of the program. It ends up producing the same effect, but the way the program does its work is slightly different. So you will see it when we execute the program. So let me run this. So let me give some coordinates. So more or less the same coordinates that I gave in the previous execution of the original version. Now you can see that it is drawing rectangle by rectangle as opposed to drawing a bunch of horizontal and vertical lines. This is probably more inefficient, but the program is better organized. I will show you the organization after it completes execution. See, it is drawing the rectangles from left to right, and once it finishes a row, it draws the rectangles in the second row, then third row, and so on. It's obviously slower, but it has merits. The reorganized version has some merits. So this new version has 3 functions. Draw rectangle is one of the functions. Get info is the second function. Draw rectangles is the third function. I have put documentation at the top at a very general level. And before each function, I have put documentation saying what each function does. So draw rectangle has this documentation here. Similarly for get info and draw rectangles. Draw rectangles uses draw rectangle and get info, and draw rectangles is the one to be called at the end. So when draw rectangles is called, it calls get info once and draw rectangle multiple times to draw all the rectangles. So let's look at get info. What does it do? It reads in all the parameters or all the information from the keyboard. So it has a statement to read in the X coordinate and the Y coordinate, the width and the height of the rectangles, then the number of rectangles. So this accomplishes essentially whatever was accomplished in the original program for data input. And assuming that all the information is acceptable, that is, width has to be greater than or equal to 5, height has to be greater than or equal to 5, number of rectangles has to be at least 2, it returns all of this information. The x coordinate of the top left corner, the y coordinate of the top left corner, the width, height, and number of rectangles. If any one of these inputs is not acceptable, we hit this line, which returns a special value called none that stands for there is no value. That is a Python word, Python keyword, none. So if all values are acceptable, then it returns 5 things. The x and y coordinates, width, height, and number of rectangles. If any one of these values, like width, height, or number of rectangles is bad, it returns 5 values again, but they are all none. So draw rectangles initially calls get info here. It calls this function. There is no parameter, so I just have empty here, parentheses here. And then I know that it supplies 5 values, so I have 5 variables on the left-hand side to store all these 5 things. Remember, these are all local variables, x top left, x y top left, etc. I need to capture all that into local variables of draw rectangles. Now, if number of rectangles is not equal to none, I set x to x top left, y to y top left, and draw each rectangle. So the number of rectangles tells me how many rectangles I should draw. So I have these rectangles drawn for every row and column. So this is a nested loop, and I'm calling the function draw rectangle with the parameters x and y for the top left coordinate of that rectangle, the width and height of the rectangle, which do not change. But the x and y coordinates would be different for the different rectangles. As you are going through a single row, the x coordinate increases by width after drawing each rectangle, and after I complete a row, the y coordinate changes. So draw rectangle has 4 parameters as suggested here. It needs the x and y coordinates of the top left corner, the width and height, and this is typical Python turtle code for drawing a rectangle. So this is useful code to draw rectangles. I can use this piece of code in other contexts to draw a rectangle. Given the x and y coordinates of the top left corner and the width and height, it will draw a rectangle. All you need to do is supply those values. Notice that x and y and width and height are all given values when draw rectangle is called. So I'm not going to worry what those values are. I simply use those values. I don't modify those values. And see how you modify x and y over here so that you can supply the right values to draw rectangle. And the last statement of the program is to call draw rectangles.